Delighted to be joined today by Magnus Lindkvist. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Share a little bit about yourself and how the last 15, 16 months have been for you.
So I'm a futurologist. I'm interested and passionate about the future. I write books about it. I talk about it. I think about it. And I've been doing it for about 2 decades. And of course, the past few months or year and a half or so have been really interesting, challenging. They've, of course, for many people been tragic. But it's forced me to really change how I work, forced me to re-examine the assumptions I've made that turned out to be wrong. And it probably gave me incentive to continue doing this for another 2 decades or so.
And so tell me, kind of the subject of futurology has always been looking out into the distance and helping us see what's to come. With the last 18 months, I suppose, the majority of us have looked no further than the end of our noses to deal with the immediate. How has futurology had to adapt?
To start with your question, we had an assumption that remarkable things would take longer to happen. So the short run would be fairly predictable, and the long run would bring us all these magnificent and strange creatures, whether it would be colonies or Mars or flying cars and the likes. And I think what the past year and a half has showed us is that that whole time continuum and what it can conjure up has changed. Really strange, unpredictable things can happen in the short run. And because they can happen in the short run, they force us to adapt in how we use technology, in how we change our behavior, in how we see everything from kind of politics, geopolitics to commerce. And it changes so quickly. So historically, I have, like most other futurologists, worked on a time continuum and assume that, well, if we're going to look decades, we have to apply more imagination. If we look in the short run, it's all about probabilities and percentages. But that is now broken. We have to have a very open, imaginary mindset, even in the short run. This kind of anything can happen. And you can, of course, frighten people with that. But I've always been in search of what are the inspirational takeaways, what are the things that can excite us in this. So I'd say that's probably the biggest tool change.
Does that mean we're at a time when actually trends can come just on more of a whim, and kind of it's harder to spot them now because it's not going to be that build up of data which is going to give it to us, because we are more susceptible to the kind of the unexpected, I suppose?
I've been in many seminars and roundtables where we've discussed trends. And I've always felt that very often a trend is what people want to happen and what people hope will happen rather than what is actually happening. So it's that kind of map versus territory tension between them. I think what we are slowly realizing is that whether we're talking about futurology or trend spotting, they are limited mental tools for us human beings to try to talk about reality in a constructive way. Science and scientists have their way of doing it, measuring data that is already out there, trying to reach a hypothesis, trying to reject that hypothesis. Futurologist was always about seeing what hasn't happened yet, or if we take these nodes of information and we put them together, what do we think could happen if we apply technology to sociology? So I think this field has never been more open to new and interesting tools. Something really interesting that has happened over the past few years is that the conversational model has had a resurgence. Going back, maybe a few years, it was always about a keynote talk, talking to people. And increasingly we see now that the conversational model, collectively trying to find your way forward, is having a resurgence, very much like Roman times, I guess, with the dialogue model.
If you're saying we have to be more creative now, we have to be thinking differently, what do we need to adapt ourselves in order to get there?
You and I recall a time when we talk about the importance of being T-shaped. You should have a broad general knowledge and then a specialization, an in-depth specialization, the T-shaped. The X-shape is all about an ability to cross-fertilize, to look at adjacent worlds and industries and take from one side and give to the other. This is, of course, historically a fantastic source for innovation, looking in an adjacent field to apply and solve a problem in your industry. But I find it extremely useful when trying to make sense of the world, trying to find new narratives. So in the past 18 months or so, I found myself looking at everything from Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, a literature professor, and his findings, cross-fertilizing that with the Nobel Prize winners Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier, who created the CRISPR-Cas9 technology. I had good fun reading Neil Ferguson's excellent book, Doom, about the politics and history of catastrophe.
Yeah. So
I think that kind of, it's a cliche, but the Renaissance mindset, where you have fields of flow, and the beauty of the human mind is that we can travel across boundaries significantly faster than companies or any kind of vessel can do. So to use that X-shaped model has for me been a phenomenal tool, and it's something I tell my audiences and my clients continuously.
That's definitely fascinating. Listen, let me ask you one last question. During this time, give us one thing we can look forward to give us some hope and excitement in the next journey we're going through.
Historically, when societies go through crises, tragedies, it could be disasters, it could be pandemics, it could be warfare, it could be anything. You go into a deep darkness inside of it. There is tragedy and heartbreak. People have to pull together. Somewhere inside of there, we discover new and previously unknown strengths inside ourselves, inside our societies. There was a beautiful book written in the 1930s called They Came Like Swallows. It was all about the Spanish flu. And I recall the end of that book where the protagonist, having survived, having lived through the hardship, sees the world anew and is so excited about life because he could never fathom that he was going to go through this in life. And now he's survived it. And if life could throw that at him and he could survive, what else could it throw at him, good or bad? So it's this ability to see the world anew, discovering new, previously unknown strengths. And I already detect that. We are seeing that in ourselves and around ourselves. There will be many years of discussions and debates about what we did wrong or what we did right, but in us will be that miraculous sense of discovery and the positive unexpected, in that reality was bigger than what our imagination could fathom before March 2020. I have that to look forward to.
Magnus, in those inspiring words and also words that make me feel good about where we're going, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Likewise. Thank you so much.